Hello everyone, it is me. Welcome back to my shop. For this episode, I am going to be tackling something that I've never tackled before. It is puppet related, but I've never made anything like this before. So with me continuing on with the channel, mastering creation. And so what I'm going to do is what is called a marionette puppet. Now, if you don't know what a marionette puppet is, it is a puppet that you manipulate using strings. Think Pinocchio. Now, with a little bit of research that I have done before, there's several different ways that you can actually manipulate this, the way that you run the strings, different type of rigs that you attach the strings to, different ways of how they can move. Some of them can be very simple, some of them can be very complicated. But for what I'm going to do, at least for this particular episode, for this particular puppet, is because I never made it before, I am going to kind of go in between with the rig. Not too simplified, but not too complicated. And as far as the way it's being made, well, traditionally you would make it out of wood, but I don't want to make a wood one right now. So what I am going to do is I've decided I'm going to try to make one not necessarily as cheap as possible, even though that you could go cheaper with the way that I'm making it. I'm going to try to do it in a way to where I'm not really breaking the bank, because I want to try to experiment with this one. And if I completely messes up, I didn't waste a lot of wood, I didn't waste a lot of time carving it or something like that. It's something that I can make real quick, but at the same time still get good results. So I have my shopping list here. This is some of the stuff that I've gotten, and for the most part this is all that I'm going to be primarily using to make this puppet. For the puppet itself, I'm going to just use some of this regular wire right here that I've got at the store. It's 55-pound wire, but it's supposed to be real thick. For the puppet itself, to make the puppet, I'm going to use the paper mache type way, but instead of regular paper, I'm going to be using tissue paper. So I bought this cheap old tissue paper that I got from the store. It's like 97 cents for 4 rolls of this, really cheap. And I bought some wood glue. Now this right here, along with the wire, was probably the most expensive items that I did. You could use the traditional water and flour method if you want, but I'm going to try wood glue because I'm thinking that once it hardens, it would hopefully be something that I could actually do a little bit of sanding on. So I'm going to try experimenting. And the string itself, bought this little fishing wire monofilament. This right here is about 25 pounds. I don't believe my puppet's going to be that heavy, so I think this should be fine. And it should still be thin enough or difficult to probably see to where if I'm manipulating it, especially on a dark stage, you won't be able to see the strings. So using just that, I think the entire puppet entirely is only going to cost me maybe about, 12 bucks, I think. So I think it's really cheap. But let's see what the results are going to look like. So the first step that I'm going to do in creating this puppet is, besides buying the materials, is I've went ahead and I got a large piece of paper, and as you can see, I kind of drew out a bit of a sketch of the puppet. Now this is just a rough sketch. This is definitely not representative of the final puppet itself. All that this is going to be used is just for size references. So I have the idea of how wide I want the shoulders to be, how tall I want it to be, the head, the body, and everything. But most importantly, where the joints are going to be at inside the puppets, so I can make sure that everything lines up. Okay, so the next step is I'm going to use this wire along with this template and some needle nose pliers, and I'm going to bend the wires into shape to make each individual section. So let me get started with that. skeleton all completed. I have it standing up with the head faced in the direction of where I would like the head to move, and I'm noticing some of the areas like in the hips on how they're permanently kind of turned this direction in relation to the shoulders and to the body. So I'm just going to go through and take these needle nose pliers and just readjust all of that to where everything is lining up in the correct direction. And some of these other areas, like I see right here, this is wanting to fly back. So I just go through and I just make some small manual adjustments just to get it to where the limbs move in the direction of where I want the limbs, especially when they're at rest. Because I don't want, like the hips, once again, a good example, I don't want to be fighting with the puppet the entire time where, when it's walking, the hips are wanting to turn this way. I want it to where at rest, the hips will face this direction. So let me go ahead and do that. Okay, that looks pretty good. So now it's ready to start building up the body. Okay, so before I go ahead and start using the paper mache clay mix that I will be making and utilizing to get the final shape of this puppet, I want to go ahead and try bulking it out a little bit and get the basic shapes in using something else, so I'm not wasting all the glue and all the paper and stuff to fill in the voids, so to say. Now this is an optional step that you can do. You don't have to do it. I'm choosing to do it, and to bulk it up you can use whatever you have laying around the house. You can use old paper, newspaper, plastic bags, tape and stuff. What I'm going to be utilizing is some paper towels and also some masking tape. So, and it's really simple. All I'm doing is just taking a little bit of the paper, I just make it into the basic shape. Let's say if we do the head, and I'm just going to just lay it around on the head like so, as you can see, just like that. And then just take a little bit of the tape and just tape it into the final form that I am wanting it to be, just like that. And I do it over the entire body until I get most of it filled out. Then I can go in with the paper mache clay mix that I'll be utilizing and get all the final details. So I'm going to do that through the entire body. So with the skeleton, so to say, all filled out, we're ready to go ahead and start fleshing it out using the paper mache clay that I'm going to create. Once again, using the wood glue, some water that I have right here, and some toilet paper. So let's go ahead and mix some of that up and start applying it. Okay, so with the water and the glue, I just go ahead and just add the glue into it. Like so. And then start to mix it up. Okay. And then once it's mixed up to the right consistency, just take a little bit of the tissue paper and just... Now, if you want to, for bulk details, you would just want to leave it as is, but for smaller details, you might want to try to tear it up and make it more into a pulp. So since I'm adding a lot more of the bulk details right now, I'm just going to just use small little sections of it like so. Dip that in. Wring out any of the excess, and then start applying that onto the marionette. Okay, this is where I am at so far. As you can see, I have it hanging up here for it to better dry, because when it's laying down, I can only work on one side. If it's hanging up, I can work on both the front and the back. Now, I had to experiment around just a little bit because my initial thought wasn't working out quite as well. I don't think that me using this type of masking tape was the best option, but it is what I have to go with. It is what I have right now, so I'm trying to push forward here. And the important thing is I'm learning from my mistakes. And one thing that I have discovered, or the best option to continue on with this, is for me to do the following. First off, I would need to cover, I'm going to do a leg here, or let's say we're going to do this little spot right here. Is what I'll do is I take a piece of this paper here and a brush. Dip the brush into the liquid, into the little paste, and it's about, you know, maybe 60% water, 40% glue. It's not an exact 50-50 mix. And then what I do is I just kind of brush it lightly onto here. This is strictly just to try to get that initial, get it initially soaked in with this. Then I start taking pieces of this tissue paper and lay it on and do the exact same thing. And what this will allow me to do is to have a base for me to start sticking on the initial layers of the clay. And the clay, I had to do something a little bit different as well. What I did before wasn't necessarily working in the regards of what I was hoping that it would work. So I once again had to kind of experiment, play around a little bit just to try to get this figured out. Let me go ahead and do 2 layers of this. Now, to make the paste, you want to do something a little bit different than what I showed you earlier. What I showed you earlier could work, but this seems to work much better. It follows the same guidelines, in that instead of me taking the tissue paper and dipping it in here and working with my hands and putting it on, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a whole bunch of this tissue paper here, and I'm going to just throw it in. And using this stiff stick, I'm going to go ahead and start stirring it up. And I want to throw enough of this paper in to where it, and my roosters are crowing, to where it soaks up all of this glue and water mix. All right. So here, just keep adding in the tissue paper until it soaks it almost all completely up. But what I want to do here, and this is the key detail, is I want to keep mixing this up. I want to tear up all of this tissue paper and basically, in essence, go from a solid to where it breaks it up into all those individual fibers, to where it's, I mean, it's still a solid, but it's kind of like really runny eggs. Okay, now that I got it all to the consistency that I want, just take a little bit of it and go around and start adding it on, just like that. And if you find that it's still a little bit too runny, so to say, just grab some more toilet paper, throw it inside there, and mix it up, and you can make it a little bit to where it's a little bit thicker, a little bit harder. So then probably under cuts and overhangs, you may want it to be just a little bit thicker, but just give it a try. You can, just by experimenting with it on your own, you'd be able to kind of get the idea of how thick is too thick, because you want to find just the right type of balance. If it's too thick, you're not going to be able to get the details that you may want out of it, which is okay, because you can go in. I'm going to show you something in a minute of how this ends up being when it's fully cured. You could probably get some extra detail just by actually doing a little bit of carving, a little bit of sanding on it. But if you want to do a lot of that details now, you may not want it too thick. But if it's too runny, it's probably not going to stick very well to the figure itself. So you just want to kind of experiment on your own. And I said your mileage may vary, so just kind of see what works for you. So I'm going to go ahead and get this all covered up, and I'll be coming back in when it's done. I have the whole body pretty much covered except for the back. The way the head is going to have to lean, I'm going to have to let all of this dry, including the front portion of the head, so I can tilt the head forward and work on the back. But yeah, I mean, it works out great. And also, give me a second. Let me try to find something here. And when this finally dries, just as I was hoping it would, it does become really hard. I mean, this right here is just a little piece right here. I can even show you on the hand in just a second. But this here is really, I mean, it's it's really hard. I mean, I could just try to, yeah. I mean, this is barely making, it's making a dent, but just barely. And you can take it and sand it, just as I was hoping that you could. So this does work, and if I can get the hand here real quick, the hand will show you. Yeah. I mean, I'm trying to break that. I can't. I mean, I could probably break it if I really put some pressure onto it, but I really can't. And this right here is starting to harden up as well. So yeah, as far as what I was hoping that this would do and how it would turn out, it's working out great. So as it's drying, and when I'm not recording, I have the fan blowing out to help it dry, but as it's drying, you can go in and you can finesse it a little bit more, just to try to, I mean, it becomes easier to model and to mold the way that you may want it as it starts to dry up. So, but before I go ahead and cut out again, I want to kind of show you, I've already started with the head, just adding in just a few basic details, and you can go in and do the same thing. Just take just a little bit of this and just apply it in like so. And if you use a tool, I'm just using this little bamboo skewer here. You can go in and kind of press in details like that. There we go. So we got two cheekbones, we got the eyebrows, so there we go. So I'm going to go ahead and let this sit and dry overnight. I'll come in every so often just to check it and maybe manipulate it just a little bit more. And as long as I can get, if this side dries up, then I'll go ahead and finish the back and then start putting in some other little details, such as, I don't know if I'll be able to do fingers, but at least thumb and a mitt. So yeah, let's see how it turns out when everything's all said and done. Okay, everybody, and now it is completely covered front to back, top to bottom, all using that bit of a kind of a clay, you might probably say, or the paper mache clay, which is comprised of, once again, the wood glue, the water, and also the tissue paper. All in all, to take care of just this, I used less than a roll of the tissue paper. I can't find what I did with it, but it wasn't a whole roll. So, you know, a single roll would get you quite a bit. And probably maybe a quarter of a bottle or a third of the bottle of the wood glue was utilized in making this. So with that all being said, the total price of this was actually a lot less than what I originally intended. So this is kind of a cheap way to make a marionette. So now what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to call this kind of a attempt one of making a marionette because I've learned quite a bit from this. So what I'm wanting to do now is I'm wanting to start over, try it again, utilizing almost this exact same procedure, except this time starting from the beginning and utilizing all of the little tips and tricks and all the little all the knowledge that I've gathered by doing this. I'm going to apply into the second one. Hopefully it'll be a lot better. So what am I going to do with this one right here? I'm going to go ahead and hand this off to my son, Jack, who you probably remember from the 3 Ways to Make videos. I want to see what he probably can do with it. And when I come back with the second video of where I start making another marionette puppet using a similar process to this before I try the wooden one, hopefully by then he'll have it ready and I'll show you what he was able to do with it. And then we can compare side by side my first attempt compared to my second attempt. And then with a third video, where I do a third attempt, we'll actually see first, second, and third. We'll see all 3 attempts, and you'll be able to see the progression in just a short period of time from me mastering this puppet to the next puppet to the next puppet. So that's what I'm going to do. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Hopefully you learned something with it. I know that I learned quite a bit from it. And once again, those mistakes that I've learned from, I'm going to apply in the second one to make that one even better. But until that video, I want to say that this is B-Built Dan, aka Daniel. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.